Jesus, I'm fucking sorry, man. What's look 2 hours and 45 minutes. Some people really love long podcasts. Okay, so welcome to tonight's podcast. I, Harblstuff, also known as Jacqueline, joined tonight with Chard Cheese or Adam. I think it's been a long time, Adam.
Yeah, I think it's for both of us, really. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you were over in Dublin. We could have done a live podcast, but that didn't really work out in the end, I don't think.
Yeah, I think the Dublin weather was keeping us apart.
Yeah, you would have gotten to meet me and Reddititis, or Reddit it is. I've never asked them how to pronounce it. Could have ended dangerously for all three of us at about 4 a.m. in some random dive club. But oh well, you enjoyed the final now.
Yeah, no, it was a good time. It was quite sort of a bit like being in Cardiff, I suppose, having sort of rugby on and everyone knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good time.
Another Welsh team ruining Irish hopes, but I suppose, yeah. So Pro 12, that was the last final. Welsh team won it.
Yeah, Scarlets are eternal Pro 12 champions.
I'll let them keep that. So yeah, the reason why we're here tonight is we're going to talk about the expansion of the Pro 12 to the Pro 14, with the addition of two South African teams, the Cheetahs and the Kings. And yeah, so we'll talk about the league in general. I suppose the Pro 12, how it became to be the Pro 12. So you know, for the benefit of South African listeners and any non-Celtic nation listeners as well, and kind of what we have from our perspective seen to be the kind of core issues of the league. And we're going to focus on the actual expansion itself, and you know, what they've decided to do and what could have been in the league as well, and is it a good idea, or what should have been done. So I suppose we might as well just go into the history of the league itself. We don't want to spend too long here. So as a Welshman, I suppose you're the most you're from the country that loves the league the most. Do you want to kind of give a brief introduction of the early history and the Welsh reaction?
Oh God, I don't think brief history is going to quite cover the early stages of the Pro 12 in Welsh terms. But
we could spend an entire podcast talking about the early years of the Celtic League, but sure, I'll let you take it away in as short a time as humanly possible.
Oh God, so we may as well take it from into the most relevant point from probably the dissolution of the Celtic Warriors to basically get us in around sort of 2004, 2005, I think it was. Might have been a bit early. No, yeah, 2004, 2005, which is when we got to the state where we're in now, where we have 4 professional regions competing, where previously it was around 8 or 10 clubs in a professional league. So in a space of around 5 or 6 years, the Welsh rugby being concentrated a hell of a lot into these 4 regions.
Yeah.
And they were now playing in this sort of weirdly kind of thrown together league, I guess, because there was the Welsh and Scottish league, and then you guys got involved, and then there was a weird thing involving there was a rebel season. It was too much to get involved in, but eventually everyone ended up being happy ish, and you ended up with the 4 Irish, 4 Welsh, 2 Scottish, and then a couple of years ago the 2 Italian teams coming into it. The league itself has changed around. Like, it started off with loads of teams. There was 18 teams or 16 teams, and it was split into groups, but they weren't necessarily conferences. And then it went to a knockout thing, and then it went to a not knockout thing, and they went back to a knockout thing. The
league didn't know what it wanted to be, really. I mean, that's kind of the best way of describing it, I think, based on what you've said. I think the first year they did it, they had a conference system, just 2 conferences, because they had 15 teams or something like that, you said. But then there were no knockouts, and then they consolidated the teams in Wales into the regions, and then that had buy-in and that had opposition, and still does in some areas, which you probably know better than me. And then really, I mean, you mentioned the Italians, like that was the first expansion of the league, but until then the league has only been contracting. And I mean, as I said in the beginning, the kind of point of this podcast, at least the part of the introduction, is to kind of focus on what we see as the league has been around for 17 years in different various formats. We want to kind of look at, well, why has it been changing so often? Why have they included the Italians, and why are they looking to include South Africans and potentially North American teams as well? Ultimately, they perceive there's a problem with the product on offer, and that they need a solution to that. So, I think really with that, we might as well kind of go into what we've discussed now. We've discussed this amongst ourselves earlier today, what we kind of see the main problems of the league to be. And I suppose, first problem that we kind of saw was one that we can talk a while about. I suppose we can actually talk about all of these for a while. The first one being broadcasting problems. So I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'm sure you and I can go onto Wikipedia and just find out straight away how many broadcasters there are and how many former broadcasters there have been. I know in Ireland it's mainly TG4, the Irish speaking channel.
Yeah.
And RTE for a few years. And then in Northern Ireland we have BBC Northern Ireland. And Wales you have S4C.
Yeah, and BBC Wales.
BBC Wales.
Scotland has BBC Scotland and BBC. It might just have BBC and BBC Alba as well.
Yes.
And then Italy has had a number of different things. I think at the moment they're on Eurosport in Italy, which is good for them. Really, it's actually quite a good deal for them. But it just shows that there's really no coherence when it comes. Maybe apart from with the BBC sort of having their different tentacles in various countries, sort of fiddling with the broadcasts over there, but I mean, it's still a separate production, really, even if it's BBC. So you've got so many different. Yeah, it's not coherent at all, really. Yeah,
exactly. Lack of coherence means they've broken it down. Each country has to have an equal amount of broadcasting rights amongst their different broadcasters. Sorry, we've also forgotten that Sky has come in, probably being the biggest development in the last few years. So you have to ask the question: is this one being broadcast on S4C, and I'm not going to be able to watch it because I'm in Ireland, or BBC Northern Ireland, and again, despite being on the same island, I don't get access to it? Can I watch it in a pub, or do I have to go down to the pub, or is there possibly going to be a stream for this for those who may be inclined to do that sort of thing? It's a bit of a nightmare, and again, looking back to rugby as a sport, but the league is a product that's being marketed and sold to people like you and me and people on the sub. If you don't make access easy for people, they're not really going to tune in.
Yeah.
You can't flick through the channels and say, oh, there's rugby on, fantastic, I'll watch it. Or you might flick through the channels and find out, oh, there's rugby on. Oh, okay, it's an Irish and it's an Italian team versus Welsh team. I think I'll pass.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens. Or it's just not broadcast at all. Like there's one or two matches per team that are just not broadcast, which is bizarre. And imagine if you'd have a shopping center in some country or some city, and you just make it difficult to get inside it. You board up some entrances and you put a ladder on the other side, and somehow you're supposed to get in. That's essentially what these broadcasting issues or lack of coherency, as you put it, causes. Now I don't know your perspective, and I mean,
Well, I mean, as well, it's not just the live broadcast, it's the fact that there's no highlight shows. Or there is a highlight. You have like Scrum 5 in Wales, but I mean, there's no cohesive roundup or way to
True.
sort of get a kind of quick look in at the league without watching a full match.
Yeah, like an hour-long program.
Yeah, and
You know?
there's not even anything available online or anything like that that would be, because obviously there are like broadcasting problems, but the internet exists, and there's been no sort of roundup show. So staying with your shopping center idea, it's like having that shopping center and there's no windows either. You can't even you can't see what's inside, let alone try and get in.
That's
so
yeah.
It's
that's actually, that's something that we could have put down as an entirely separate point. Like RTE does have, when the season is on, they do have kind of a weekly show, and this is actually part of the next point that we're going to come up with as well. Is whenever they review it, they review international rugby, especially around international window time. They'll talk about the European Cup, and then they'll talk about Pro 12, now going to be Pro 14. So I know, sorry, just in terms of the naming thing, we're probably just going to be calling it Pro 12/14 just at different times, just in case people are going to get confused or annoyed about it. We're still not used to it. And then they'll cover some local rugby as well. But the problem is, that's not going to be seen in Belfast. That's not going to be seen in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Cardiff, or Treviso. So what's the point? It's really localized, and it's going to have a very Irish slant. And partially to the next point that we're going to talk about is they don't really talk about the Pro 12 in a good light. There's always kind of sly comments like, "Oh, it's only the league. It's all about qualifying for Europe."
Yeah.
It's comments like that we'll come to that point in a bit, that just kind of damage the league as well. We've got this lack of coherency all over the place with different broadcasters, different countries, different languages. But the one thing, again, we kind of glossed over Sky. Sky also has the paywall versus free. And the reason why it's in like all these different languages and different countries and different availabilities is it's free. But my question to you would be, what if now that we have the Pro 14, it is a potentially juicy package for a broadcasting corporation to take on, and as far as I understand, it was actually the lead sponsor Guinness and broadcasters that really pushed the Pro 14 when the South African teams approached them. Would, hypothetically speaking, because we don't know if any news is going to come out or not, if Sky would turn around and say, look, if you go for the Pro 14, we will pay you another 5 or 10 million to take all of the matches. How would you react to that, or do you think that could be a good move to paywall all of it?
I think that would be incredibly short-sighted by the Pro 12 or 14 or whatever it is. It's money coming in from Sky, but I mean, at the moment, you look at the Pro 12, it's pretty unique in terms of when you compare it to the top 14 and Premiership.
Yeah.
Almost every single game each round is broadcast somewhere. And everyone streams sports now online, legally or illegally. It's you find a way. So there's a way to watch, almost every single round. You don't get that in any other league. In England and France, you get like maybe 3 games a weekend.
True.
Whereas you're getting 5 or 6 with the Pro 12. If you have Sky take over the whole thing, you're losing that. They're going to pick a couple of select games a weekend to show. So
in other words, what you're saying is, out of 152 games, they won't broadcast all 152.
It wouldn't be.
They'll broadcast 100 or 110 or something.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I mean, you have fixture clashes and things going on like that, which mean that as of now, you can have 2 different screens or 2 different windows open and watch 2 matches at the same time.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be possible under Sky.
So So one reason though I'm asking really is because Sky has lost the rights to the Aviva Premiership and the European Champions Cup and Challenge Cup.
Yeah.
So similar to Guinness, they're kind of on the lookout for a new product to sell. And that's kind of why this has kind of come into mind. Really, it's they're on the lookout. They kind of backed and pushed the expansion to the Pro 14, and it would kind of solve the problems of broadcasting incoherencies throughout the different nations. It would give one source for people to go to, and let's be honest, when it comes to streams, it's probably the easier source to find for streams.
Yeah.
There are providers out there for that, whether, again, as you said, legal or illegal. And whereas BBC, there are none. S4C and TG4, 0, and even TG4 here in Ireland, the quality of their online streaming is just horrendous. Like it really only suits a laptop screen, which, I'm someone who will sit back, plug in my laptop with a HDMI cable and watch it on TV. It just doesn't work. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, as they're looking for, they've freed up some slots. They would have most of the focus for rugby because they have lost their marquee products, and that would net more money for the league. Again, that's a bit short-sighted because he wants exposure. But then you'd also have potentially a round of program that would be very pro. Okay, that bad choice of words. I was going to say pro 14, but very in favor, very positive towards the league itself. That those, I don't want to. I'm playing devil's advocate here because I do believe in free to air. But it is something that is on my mind as well. Is there potential for solving the problems that exist?
Yeah, I personally don't believe that's going to come from Sky, or BT or whatever subscription service there is that would be interested in taking on the Pro 14. I mean, like I said before, there's not just the. I don't know whether you've heard recently the Sky Sports changes that they've done to their TV channels.
I saw something. I don't know what happened. All I know is that they've changed, what is it, Sky Sports 1, Sky Sports 2 to be something completely weirdly named.
Yeah, so rugby is now going to be on Action or Arena or something like that, whatever it is. So it's being lumped in with tennis and darts and things like that.
Because those are action sports.
Yeah. So they've kind of relegated rugby. It used to be one of their big selling points. Football, rugby, cricket, that was Sky Sports' thing.
Yeah.
Now they're elevating the side of F1 side of things and the cricket and the football. And rugby is being pushed down to them. So I don't know whether they really have the kind of... With them losing the rights to the Europe and to the English league, whether they're that bothered with rugby anymore, I don't know. They weren't getting great numbers from it, as far as I can tell, especially with the Pro 12. So it's, I think if you want a cohesive service, maybe not to, maybe even watching some matches, I think you look at what World Rugby are doing with so like tier 2 things where they have a stream or highlights on their website that's available to everyone. Rugby Europe do it as well. Whether Pro 12 could sort of maybe invest a bit more in online streaming. You could pay for it; it wouldn't have to be free. Whether they could do something like that.
So it is funny that you mentioned something like that because I normally don't do online surveys for any company really, but up came something from EPCR. The European Cup organisers, and I just kept on going and going. How many questions these things have, and rate things from 1 to 10, and finally, somewhere near the end, they said one of the questions was, how would you rate the idea of an online streaming package if you could watch, select rugby games or all rugby games or something like that, and 5 or 10 or whatever I gave it, definitely the most important thing.
Yeah.
So they only had 2 questions on it, and then on the final page they said, okay, do you have any final comments? And I just wrote in there, going back to your question about online streaming, I would absolutely 100% pay for a service that would offer me online streaming of every single rugby match that is available in the Champions Cup or Champions Cup and Challenge Cup. So I mean, if I have some sort of let's say a bundle package, like if I pay more, I also get the Challenge Cup. Maybe I love rugby so much I'll do that. Just to see more teams play. But definitely, I mean, that's something I was kind of intrigued just to see that the EPCR came up with that as a question in one of their questionnaires. And I don't think they're going to maybe invest in something like that. And then you've got the questions of how much would that service cost. But I agree with you. I mean, if there be some sort of online streaming service for the Pro 12, that would probably solve that issue. But I guess we're spending quite a lot of time on broadcasting at the moment. I suppose moving forward, just to reporting and media quality. So I suppose this is something that really we can't. I don't think we're going to spend a huge amount of time on this, and really it's going to be from my perspective than your perspective, and we kind of already touched on this as well. So I suppose from my perspective in Ireland, the quality of reporting, say in papers by columnists, as well as say RTE, has been not so flattering of the Pro 12. So whenever, say, there just be analysis of matches or the league or coming up, again, I mentioned earlier the kind of roundup show that you'd have on Mondays by RTE. Several times I've heard off the cuff comments, I forget the guy's name, of the moderator, guy with glasses and kind of balding head, where he just kind of turned around and say, "Oh, sure, that's only the league. I mean, it's all about qualifying for Europe." It's off the cuff comments like this in Ireland that really kind of just get ingrained in people's heads that, sure, it's only the league. It's only, kind of for training, it's to get our players, match fit, or, especially in the mid 2000s, kind of, say around the time that Munster won the Heineken Cup and a few years, preceding that, where the whole perception, and I think this happened in Wales probably as well, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, was it is only just the league, and Europe is where you want to go and play. And that's not a healthy mindset to have. And I think the word you used actually yourself was, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when you start reporting that it's not an important league and it's only just for training and it's only just for qualification, maybe not dedicated fans of rugby like you or me or a lot of people on the sub, but people who'd have passing interest, say, in the Six Nations or Autumn Internationals, and maybe the final of European Cup, they'd hear this and they'd kind of turn around and just go, sure, yeah, it's only just the league. Back in the 2005-2006, you would have openly said, yeah, it's all just about protecting players and playing them for important matches, which it is still there today, but it's slightly different. And it just seems to have become that self-fulfilling prophecy that here we are now today, rumors leaked of this expansion, and in reading articles over the last 2-3 weeks, and this is my final point, you just had the feeling as if everybody reporting on these leaks and potential expansion went ahead and just talked the league down. Oh, it's not too great. It's dying. It's it needs to expand or it'll be gone. As someone who goes week in, week out to Leinster matches with a season ticket, I would completely and utterly disagree with that. I think if you talk the league down, people will expect less from it and will kind of look at it negatively from that perspective. And I've seen it in posts on the sub as well. Expand or die. And I disagree with that. And that's just what I feel that reporting in media has just had a negative influence over the last 17 years up to today. I mean, how is it in Wales? Is it much different?
Yeah, I think the effects are the same, but I think the angle the media or go at is a bit different. Because I mean, Europe in Wales in terms of the Heineken Cup hasn't got the same history or importance I think it does in Ireland.
Yeah,
I mean, Leinster must obviously have a huge history in Europe.
yeah,
It's safe to say the Welsh regions don't. Um, so I mean, European qualification it's big here, but it's more like it's seeing them have a chance. The league is considered important, but it's used to blame a lot of things. It's used as a scapegoat a lot of the time. It was actually a meme on the sub a while back with it's the Pro 12's fault.
I thought that was
Which was which is a Robin McBride I think comment or Sean Edwards. I can't remember who it was. That was blaming the Pro 12.
Sorry, I misunderstood. Maybe I completely misunderstood the meme. I just seem to remember when the first time I encountered the meme on the sub was when Ireland beat South Africa with 14 men, and suddenly I just saw it's the Pro 12's fault everywhere. So I thought it had something to do with that South African perception. Sorry, South African perception of of the Pro 12.
Right.
So what exactly? What was the origin, or what was the? Correct me here.
I can't remember the exact origin of it. I think it was something to do with Wales's performance, and the only excuse they come up with was the Pro 12. And of course, knowledgeable rugby fans would say that's absolutely ridiculous. But the casual fans who might just watch the occasional Scrum 5 will say, "Oh yeah, the Pro 12, it's a terrible league. It's shit. It's ruining our players." And that sort of attitude will sort of bleed through into the rest of the community then. And so yeah, it's less of a sort of where in Ireland, like you're saying, it's sort of treated as a training league or unimportant. In Wales, it's kind of seen as a bane on the game. In Welsh rugby, it's kind of the Pro 12 is toxic for our teams and things like that. And that's not just coming from the kind of Ponty fans that hate the regions. That's coming from people who are fans of the regions but just don't like the league. So you end up with a similar result in that it's negatively talked about and people believe it or people sort of pick it up, but I think it's for different reasons.
Yeah. So I mean, just to put out a disclaimer, I suppose. I think both countries, when positive things do happen, like Scarlets winning, or an Irish team winning, I'm not saying that suddenly every single reporter turns around and goes, "Oh, this is such a shit league, it's unimportant." No, it is truly celebrated.
Yeah.
Like it is really just the language you use and the kind of style of talking when you're talking about the Pro 12. If you're talking it down passively or making these comments, like you're really kind of just pandering to tropes by saying like, "Oh, it's only a training league," or it's more important just to qualify for Europe and you rest your players. I would kind of disagree that that players are really rested like they were previously. I'm not saying that they aren't, but I wouldn't go out and say, "Oh, Leinster just goes out and rests their players." We're only playing against Dragons. I mean, Dragons did won a double against us only a few years ago. So I don't think any team these days are stupid enough to risk losing a match against any team, whether you're 10 points or 40 points ahead of them. It just doesn't happen these days like it used to. You take every single opposition seriously. I mean, Leinster has lost in Italy before. We've also drawn in Italy before. You cannot risk these matches. I mean, obviously, you maybe mix in a few players looking for experience to kind of move them up in the team. But yeah, I mean, I just feel as if it's pandering to tropes, and people just expect them to say this. And they, again, going back to the self-fulfilling prophecy, they talk about, it's more important that you play in Europe than winning the Pro 12. And this might really annoy some people, but I just feel as if a team like Leinster really takes the Pro 12. Now, obviously, I'm talking about Ireland only here. Takes the Pro 12 a bit more seriously than, say, Munster. Whereas Munster, their history was the European Cup, the Heineken Cup, and they had their glory they got there before Leinster. They had some fantastic years as well, and it was all about reaching that pinnacle. And they had much better progress, much quicker progress than Leinster, and they were more organised than Leinster. They were a much better team than Leinster, and you could see it when they came up to Dublin, and they had more fans in Lansdowne Road than there were Leinster fans. That was because it was a European Cup. But then you look at the inverse, which is Leinster. Only two seasons ago, we fired Matt O'Connor because we came second. Or sorry, not we came second. We sorry, it's getting late. We were in a semi-final, lost in the 95th minute with extra time against the reigning champions, a team that has gone on to win 3 years in a row with some of the best players worldwide. And it was a bad pass and an intercept, right? I mean, we could have won. But instead, we came 5th in the league, and we fired him.
Yeah.
Because that's how seriously we take the league. So, I just feel as if there's different perceptions where you go. And because in the early 2000s there was such a focus on how amazing the the Heineken Cup at the time was, and honestly the journey and the battle for Munster to get there, and then eventually Leinster as well, it was just seen as more prestigious. And then the reporters kind of came from these ex-players from the early, mid and late 2000s, and they still have that perception of the European Cup is absolutely everything, and the Pro 12, Pro 14 is just a route to get there. And that's unfortunate, because the fair weather fans, I don't want to call them fair weather fans, sorry, but let's say the passing fans, your fans in passing for Six Nations and so on, they'll hear all of this and they'll just kind of tune the league out. But something that could help it is what you mentioned really a while ago, which is a roundup show.
Yeah.
That's independent. Say a Welshman, a Scotsman, an Irishman, and no, this is not the start of a joke, talking about the week and what's to come. But again, how do you do that with different broadcasters?
Yeah, it's something that it's always going to be a problem, just due to the international nature of the competition.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at something like it's not as, it hasn't got the same sort of, European Cup has a kind of roundup type thing on BT Sport, I think. But that's just a part of their general roundup show that they have weekly anyway. So it's the fact that you've got different countries involved does make it difficult. Just as part of the nature of the competition, I don't think it's a fault in that sense. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's any kind of incompetence by the Pro 12 or any kind of negligence by them. I think it's just the nature of the competition itself that leads to that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the reason why we're listing these points right now, I mean, we're not here to shit on the league, or we're not here to say let's wave a magic wand to make everything better. These are just core problems that some of them may be fixable, and some of them may not be. I mean, hey, for all we know, maybe we should get you, me, and HMFC as the Scotsman to jump on, or just to get in front of a camera and just talk non-stop about the Pro 12 and how great it is, and maybe that will have an effect, or maybe we'll just turn a lot of people away from the Pro 14. but yeah, so I mean, look, probably was incorrect about some of this stuff. Maybe I'll be corrected by Munster fans out there, which, for all I know, I could be completely utterly wrong. That was a perception from my part. So, really just openly discussing what we perceive certain issues to be in the league and what kind of holds it back from being equivalent to the top 14 or the Aviva Premiership. And so, I mean, I'm moving on because there's a lot to talk about really with what isn't being done well, and another one is marketing, and I suppose we can call it more so brand awareness. If it's a product, then the brand is the Pro 12. So, really, when it comes down to marketing, it is an expensive act to do. And you can't really market every match. So, I mean, how does Cardiff do it?
Well, I mean, the sort of the extent of marketing here is for season tickets, generally.
Yeah.
So throughout the summer, you got buses and advertising boards and everything like that is just apply for Cardiff Blues season ticket, things like that. And then as soon as the season starts, you probably won't see another advert outside the Arms Park until the Christmas derbies, maybe if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And then not again until Judgment Day. Which is another months away. So there's no sort of, if you didn't know it was happening, you'd have no idea there was a rugby season going on in Cardiff that they were playing in, and a top level league at that.
I mean, that's amazing because so it's like Cardiff is the rugby city.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier to you this sort of before we started recording that there wasn't a lot of sports advertising in general in Cardiff. But I mean, on the street I'm on now, there are banners advertising cricket. By far the biggest, or far from the biggest sport in Cardiff or Wales.
Well, that's because you play as England.
But yeah,
you got something I'll never understand. But anyway,
banners advertising the Glamorgan cricket team in Cardiff, and that's more than the Blues will probably get all season.
Yeah,
and that kind of lack of awareness for the public towards the public is probably hurting them. I mean, in terms of the Pro 12 as a whole, I found it quite. I went to Dublin recently, as you said, and I went to the Guinness Storehouse while I was there. So of course, Guinness being the current sponsors of the Pro 12, they had in their gift shop quite a lot of Pro 12 stuff. But it was quite weird that it was just things like Pro 12 t-shirts and stuff like that. And it's like they weren't quite sure how to market the Pro 12. You wouldn't know what it was if you didn't know rugby. It was just t-shirts with Pro 12 on it. It's like going into a shop and having a Barclays Premier League t-shirt. It's so weird. It's
probably like, could you imagine? You're like, okay, I haven't been there in a while, so I mean, I'm kind of imagining right now just like a group of American tourists going in, kind of just looking at this Pro 12. What's that?
Yeah.
Is that an American football, or what is that? I don't know. So I guess it is bizarre in a way.
The Pro 12 has, it just made me think that the Pro 12 really hasn't got this identity outside of rugby that, perhaps in football there is a kind of, you say the Championship or the Champions League or the Premier League or anything like that, and people who don't even watch football,
it's household names.
Yeah, no, they know what you're talking about. They know that the Premier League is more important than the Championship. You don't have to watch football to know that. You just know it because they're the names. But you talk about the Pro 12 to someone who's never heard about rugby, and it's blank.
The answer you sometimes get is, oh, the Rabo.
Yeah, or the Magnus League or something like that.
I saw some of those jokes on the sub earlier today talking about the Pro 14, and like, Pro 14, it's changed names again. I was only just getting used to the Pro 12. Then someone chimes in, sure, I'm still calling it the Rabo. Or Magners League or Celtic League or whatever. But it's bizarre.
It's hard because it is a new product essentially. The league has sort of struggled for many years, not just to find about, like you said, like you mentioned at the start, not just about what it is and how it's going to work, but what it is as a sporting event. It's a year-long or season-long competition featuring some of the best rugby teams in Europe that are worldwide names, in some cases.
Yeah.
But the competition has no prestige in that sense, and they don't seem to be. I think the Guinness sponsorship helped. To be honest, it seemed to, because the Rabo sponsorship to me was the orange and blue branding.
It was horrible.
It just looked so.
Well, a bit of backstory to that is apparently they just couldn't get a sponsor, and they just ended up taking the Rabo Bank, which isn't it's a Dutch bank, I think, and it just doesn't exist in Ireland. I don't know about the UK. Why is it sponsoring this sport?
Yeah.
Why is it sponsoring this league? Now, I remember when the rumours were coming out about a new title sponsor, and I remember hearing from my friends and contacts and colleagues as well about rumours of Guinness coming in, and at the same time rumours then of Sky coming in, and that kind of double whammy happened at the same time. Like, okay, I understand we spoke about Sky earlier, and the positives and negatives of it, but either way they're still throwing money at the league, whether it's $1 million, $2 million, or $5 million, whatever it is. Guinness as well, I believe, is about $5 million or more per year. Sorry, I think it is a heavy hitter of a brand, and when you say Sky is showing it, I believe that is better than saying S4C or TG4 is broadcasting it. That just it like, again, if we look at it as a product should be accessible, shouldn't be confusing in how to get there, and needs to have a bit of prestige. So again, we got Guinness, fantastic, and they are actually excellent sponsors when it comes to a lot of things. Now, okay, I'm a bit confused about how they dealt with the gift store, but and then Sky as well. Generally, they're going to do a better job than local broadcasters. So, with that money, you'd assume they'd be able to do something a bit more with marketing. I mean, we're talking still about the Pro 12 league itself, marketing itself. So we've moved on from Cardiff as far as I've understood, and the Pro 12 really only ever advertises the final.
Yeah.
It's a bit, and they still leave the semi-finals up to the home team to advertise. And outside of the Leinster-Munster match, I haven't really seen a lot of Pro 12 advertising from Leinster. And okay, I understand from one perspective, look, again, marketing is an expensive thing to do, especially physical marketing out in the street to buy a bus shelter ad space or a billboard. I mean, we're talking actually more money than you'd expect. But there should still be ways to get out there, get the word out there. Like, we're in a capital city of 600,000 in the city itself, and the Greater Dublin area being 1.6 million, and Leinster being 2.6, 2.7 million. I mean, that's close to the population of Wales for one team, and we only have 18,000 seats, and the odd time it's sold out. And sometimes, I mean, I think, what team was it? Was it Cardiff who came over the same weekend that Wales was playing Ireland in soccer? And I kind of turned around to friends of mine and some people from the sub as well, and said this could be good. Welsh fans coming over for soccer, which was a sellout, I believe. Surely a lot of them from Cardiff will turn around and go to the Cardiff match, being from Wales, being from the land of rugby. And the weather was immaculate. It was about 22, 23 degrees. It was sunny. I was wearing sunglasses. I couldn't see anything. And there was maybe about 11,000 people.
Yeah.
There were fewer people there than I would have expected on a normal average day. and I was expecting close to a sellout because so many Welsh people in town. I guarantee you they just didn't even know the match was on. There's no advertising done. Now, maybe I'm asking you a bit much that an individual team would advertise, random matches. But just for the catchment area of Leinster versus other sports, I mean, Gaelic football has a religious following. You'll see a lot of people, 10, 20,000, 30,000 people go to matches. I don't see these advertised. Maybe I'm not the target audience, but I don't see them advertised. But I know a lot of people who would go to these matches. And then you've got, there'd be, I talk maybe more about the Electricity League in soccer. They'd get a decent amount of people going out. Now, I mean, they'd be smaller stadiums, but they get, a decent proportion of those seats sold out. So, just kind of expect maybe a bit more engagement towards brand awareness that this exists. This is what the Pro 12, Pro 14 is. We have matches almost every 2 weeks. Tickets aren't expensive. Just get the awareness out there, get people coming down, bums on seats, have a good time. Maybe not in the dead of winter, but certainly when September, October, or towards the end of the season, April, I still think something could be done. And then the Pro 12, just as an organisation, does nothing apart from the final. And again, brand awareness. Nobody knows it exists. Well, okay, people might know, but they don't really know the structure. They don't know the importance. They don't know the ins and outs. They don't know there's a match on every 2 weeks in home matches per team every 2 weeks on average. So, I don't think we can turn around and say, let's wave a magic wand and give every team, $1 million for advertisement or the Pro 12 for advertisement. Again, I think it's just one of those topics that we're not going to have an answer for. And in a way, this expansion is a bit of a reboot and it's getting the name out there. Will it have a long-term effect, or will it just be one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, South Africans, cool, they need it?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a step on. I think the first thing they did to sort of legitimize the league properly and sort of take it from its kind of the roots or its perceptions that it was a small league is giving the whole grand final thing. Because I mean, before the final every year was in Dublin, in the RDS.
Okay.
But it was,
no comment.
It was in the RDS, and it was 18,000 people.
Yeah.
Either watching Leinster or Ospreys win, and then they decided to take it to a couple of years ago. They trialled it out in Belfast as a neutral venue, sold out there. It was a great final. Tried it in Edinburgh. They got an even bigger crowd there. Another great final.
Yeah.
And then take it into Dublin. Granted, it wasn't a sellout stadium, but I think it was well over 40,000 there.
Yeah.
Another great final. With a great atmosphere, and that sort of, the Aviva Premiership, when they started having the grand finals in Twickenham, didn't sell out Twickenham. First of all, they were far from it. It's going to take a while for this grand final thing to catch on, but I think it's made the league feel a lot more. It's good. It's like it's got a good closure to it. Like it's got a good build up to it, and you're not just watching any other club match in any other club ground. And I think this expansion then is that next step onto that, with bringing in, comparing it to the Italians, where it was just done basically for money and having these 2 extra teams to play. These 2 South African teams are quality. They didn't have the best season in Super Rugby, but the Kings are improving, and the Cheetahs aren't bad at all. So they're quality teams that they're bringing in that I believe will actually improve the quality of the rugby in the Pro 12, and even if it doesn't happen immediately, the perception that they will is important in terms of the marketing for it. So again, it's the next step in making the Pro 12 seem more like a legitimate competition compared to that of the Premiership or the Top 14.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and actually going back to to your point of the grand final, um, that as far as I remember was a big push from Sky. So I think kind of again as our chat kind of here progresses, there is more now. It is kind of demands from Sky more so than anything. Like they're saying, look, if we're going to broadcast this, we want to see some changes. And that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, but maybe I didn't mention it. Is they have dealt with rugby leagues, not the sport, but they've obviously dealt with the Champions Cup and the Viva Premiership. They know how what a good product looks like or should look like. And that has a grand final that you can market for 8 months, and then build up to it, start selling tickets early, and then we'll have it here, and whatever teams are in there, we're going to have fans from different teams all around because they expected their teams to get in, or you advertise the fuck out of it until people want to actually go, which is why I'm actually a bit. I watched the match, the final on TV when I got home that day, and I thought it was actually a sellout. So apparently maybe it was over 40,000. I can check it up, but I might do that in a few minutes. It looked like a sellout. And I'd be a bit disappointed if it wasn't a sellout because oh no, sorry, you're right. Yeah, I remember they were kind of selling tickets up to it, and I think it was maybe around 45 or 46. It is slightly disappointing because normally people in Ireland are always up for sport. It is entertainment. It is a good day out. If it's not prohibitively expensive, and you go out and have a couple of pints and have a couple of pints after. So I'm kind of disappointed that maybe it wasn't a total sellout. But again, that's where kind of certain things like marketing, maybe you should go in and have more promotions, like bring in more younger people and sell like if it hasn't sold out, slash the prices, bring in younger people and expose the sport or expose young people to the sport. That way you're justifying the reason for selling seats as you're getting a full house, and you're introducing the younger generations to rugby as well. So I mean, there's two reasons for it. But just on what you said about these teams being quite good, you said that they didn't do too well this season. I remembered a post from Supercross Prawn, I was going to say Pawn, where he said that the Kings beat the Jaguars, Bulls, Sharks, and Waratahs this season. I mean, that is going to be an entertaining matchup because I would have thought that the Kings were the weaker of the two. But here we go. Leinster is going to have a tough time against them. And I mean, look, both teams love running rugby and offloads, and South Africans are man beasts. So I agree with you in a way. Like, it is legitimizing it a bit more by look. We're going to come to the points later, but what is the difference between expansion for expansion's sake and expansion to South Africa? Well, expansion for Italy was, we want to grow the game. Plus, they have 60 million people there, so we can advertise more Rabos at the time, whereas now it's Guinness. It creates a larger market, and the product gets more of a reach, and therefore sponsors have more of a reason to throw money at it. Fortunately, we'll talk about the Italians later, but compared to South Africa, here we're going to have two heavy-hitting teams coming in with a sexy brand of rugby. And it is going to be an interesting matchup, whether it's home, away, or we play them twice or only once. It's going to be. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I want to see Scarlets against the Cheetahs. I want to see Leinster against the Kings. I want to see Munster against the Kings as well. See how they go up against these teams. So yeah, I mean, that's my hope. Is, as you said, it's I suppose, giving more prestige and legitimacy to the league, and hopefully this will resonate with people as well, like the average fans.
Yeah, which I think actually leads quite well onto the next point. In the competitiveness of the league at the moment.
Yep.
And it being kind of very much sort of split in two between the good half and the bad half, should we say, in kind of pretty much as it is.
Well, I think we can put it a nicer way than that.
Well,
but,
I mean, I don't want to sort of mince words, but it's generally sort of the teams that have a shot of winning and the ones that don't.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I mean, there is no easy way of saying it, right? I mean,
I fall as a supporter of the Blues. I fall into the half that doesn't have a chance of winning, so I feel like I'm allowed to say it.
Yeah, because if I would have said this, I wouldn't have lived it down. But no, like, I think, we've had this discussion probably more than once off of any recordings, which is why we've never had this conversation going out into the public. And I always feel bad because when I say, when I talk about this topic of, say, competitiveness, I probably always bring up the Blues as the prime example. And I don't mean it in a negative or disparaging way, but like, I look at it as, what does the potential of the Cardiff Blues have? As a capital city, as a team in a city of 350,000 people with, region of, I'm going to throw an extra 100,000 on there because I don't know the population, let's just say 450,000 in total. It's no small area. And, again, you can imagine capital city mashups, Belfast, Cardiff, or Dublin, Cardiff, or Edinburgh, Glasgow, Cardiff, or Munster, Cardiff. Like, these could be, like, when I went to Wales, Ireland in 2015 for the Six Nations, I, said to people that, rugby is my religion and Cardiff is my Mecca. Because when you come here, like you can go up to, at the time I was single, you could go up to any girl and you can talk rugby and she'll, willingly have this conversation with you and probably turn around and say, you're actually a fucking idiot, because you don't know anything, or agree with what you're saying because she understands and knows it. And everybody you talk to in Cardiff seems to know and understand and love rugby, which is, again, and it's come up before in this conversation here tonight, is it is a bit unfortunate that Cardiff doesn't have that atmosphere when it comes to the Pro 12.
Yeah. It's honestly it's something that I don't think I could cover or even begin to scrape the surface of in this discussion at the moment, because I mean there are so many layers to the problems with not just Cardiff but all of the regions have. With their sort of connection with the fans and the rivalries and histories and everything like that. But I mean, I think it's definitely something that it is a problem. Whether it's something that can be solved by the Pro 12 or whatever the Pro 12 does in terms of expansion, I don't know. I personally don't think that just from Cardiff Blues problems are going to be solved by expansion or not expansion or whatever it is. I don't think it's going to make a difference. It's an internal issue. It's a Welsh rugby issue. And the Blues have to learn to thrive and compete in whatever competition that exists around them, whether it's the Pro 12 or the Pro 14. And again, going back to this, the points I made earlier about the media coverage, using the Pro 12 as a kind of scapegoat for why Cardiff aren't doing well or why they're not getting fans is part of the problem. It's the Pro 12. The name the Pro 12 shouldn't be a reason for fans not to turn up to matches. Because I mean, you look at like just a couple of years ago, Cardiff were as crap as they have been for ages, but Toulon turn up in the Heineken Cup, one of the most prestigious names in one of the most prestigious competitions, and they fill the stadium, one of the biggest crowds they've seen for years. Not because they thought they were going to win, they did, but they weren't expected to. It wasn't about form. It was about the perception of the competition and the history behind it. And it's the fans. I believe anyway that the fans or the team should put a bit more behind the Pro 12 in terms of what it is, and stop putting it down as a reason for not going to games. And start looking at. I know it sounds like I've just said it is because of prestige. I mean, because of the fans' perception of prestige. That they shouldn't be turning up. I feel like I've gone around in about 20 circles in that point. But
well, no, I felt I've done that myself. This whole podcast and each different point, but I mean, again, it's kind of what we spoke about. The media kind of puts it down. Probably management and other sources might kind of point at being unhappy with the league structure, and maybe again, I feel that in the last 10 years or 15 years, a lot of finger pointing has been done by the Welsh to the Irish teams and system for saying that that's the reason why the Pro 12 is not doing well, because the Irish always rest their players. And then, they don't play their big hitters, so no one goes to our matches, and so nobody cares. And then they go on and they win the league because they've rested their players. Yeah, but whenever we have played our big players, still nobody turns out to the matches, and we still do well in the league. I mean, I'm not saying that Welsh teams don't, but it's kind of scapegoating. It's kind of like the British press and Brexit. Is kind of what it sounds like. Let's not go down that rabbit hole, but it is kind of, that's what it sounds like. The way you've said it. And I mean, look, when we're talking about league competitiveness, it is going to be each team has their own has their own reasons. Freudian slip, obviously. Each team has their own reasons for maybe not being the best they could be. And like, we're looking at this, I believe, more so on averages over the season. Over the competition history, right? So there are some teams that could be doing, but like the Italian teams just themselves. When we raised this point earlier off the podcast, kind of listing out what we're going to be talking about, I believe you said, look, the Italian teams are, if you look in the average of the competition, they're underperforming or they're not competitive. But if you look at them by themselves and tailor your expectations to rugby in Italy and where they've come from, then maybe they're kind of doing, or they're meeting reasonable expectations.
Yeah, but perhaps the Pro 12 is better than people think, because
the
Italians aren't underperforming in a shit league. They're performing exactly as they should be in a league that has good teams in it.
So we can. I don't think we'd do ourselves any favors by kind of listing off teams that are maybe not so competitive. Every union in the Pro 12 has an underperforming team, at least one, and that can change year on year. And obviously, if we average it out over the competition history, maybe one or two turn out to be less competitive than the other teams in that union. But one point that you did raise was that there is kind of a symbiotic relationship between clubs and unions. And again, this is just for people that don't know, we did touch on the history, but one thing we didn't say is the league is run by the IRFU, the WRU, and SRU. The Italians and the South Africans have no contribution. They can make requests, but the voting rights lie with these three unions. Think of World Rugby and their voting system, and how European teams essentially dominate, or European teams and Sanzar teams dominate. because they're the traditional teams. But other voting blocks do exist still in there. So there exists a symbiotic relationship really between the core nations, the Celtic nations, and their clubs. And you kind of mentioned this for a reason, or a reason of competitiveness maybe being a problem, and how performance might affect the actual parent union. I mean, do you want to roll with that idea?
Yeah, so my point was basically sort of taking just a couple of examples, sort of fairly recent ones. You have London Welsh in the English system that haven't been doing very well recently. I mean, they're in the 11th tier at the moment, but
they exist.
Yeah,
I thought
it's London Welsh amateurs. They exist as of the moment, and they're playing in the 11th tier of the system. But they've as a club, for whatever reason, you can go into whatever reason they want, failed, and they were cast out of the system. And the system, as it works, all the clubs are separate from each other and from the union. Can just move into place.
Yeah.
Everything works fine as normal. No one else is affected. Everything carries on for normal except for London Welsh. But you look at, for example, the Dragons. They've recently lost their main sponsors or owners. So the WIU, being involved, have had to step in and take over.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
the teams in the Pro 12 aren't allowed to fail. They can't fail. They have this relationship with the unions, and with the fact that the Pro 12 is ring fence, which is another issue or topic for discussion. But the fact that it's ring fence means that teams can't fail.
Yeah,
and because of that distribution of not just money, but resources and time as well by the unions towards failing regions or provinces in Ireland, like with Connacht a few years ago. It has the potential to unbalance things, and it means that there isn't the kind of... It doesn't always go wrong. I mean, look at Connacht, what ended up being quite alright out of it. But it's not a self-solving system like it is in England or France, where the clubs have their own way of dealing with things, and if they're not competitive, they're not competitive. Another club will take their place.
Yeah.
There's this kind of non-failure, which means that if something goes wrong, it goes wrong for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to take a drain on other regions, provinces, or teams' resources as well. So I think, now obviously it's not a failure, but the debt that Munster has, like it or not, it's going to be a burden on the entire Irish system, not on just Munster. Or, I mean, the Irish system is the IRFU. It is an IRFU loan. If for some reason... Now again, let's be quite brutally honest here. Over the last few years, this past season as an exception, Munster hasn't been performing well. Attendance has plummeted, and the naming rights value for Thomond Park disappeared. I heard they potentially could have gotten about 15 million if they would have sold the rights when the stadium was built. Instead they didn't, and obviously we're in the middle of a crisis, and then they weren't performing as well as they used to, and then there was just no interest. So let's just say that continued, and this season wasn't the amazing success that they had, which nobody envisaged coming. Not even dedicated Munster fans themselves saw coming. Imagine if this continued for another few years and they got into financial difficulties. Well, there would be... The RFU would not let them fail, and that would obviously then come out of the pockets of every other team. Obviously, look, I mean, I want that to happen if that was the case, because I don't want to see them fail. But that's just, I'm using them as an example. I hope people don't think I'm picking on Munster. It's just the only province that I can think of at the moment with significant debt. I think if we turn what you said on its head and actually say something along the lines of it is a league that doesn't reward success.
Okay.
So you're saying that we don't let any team fail. Well, I think if you look at it this way around, no matter what happens in a season in the Premiership or top 14, a team, or in the case of top 14, two teams will be relegated. No matter what, that will happen. It rewards the teams that are going to get promoted. The teams that fight for it, the teams that perform better than expected, the teams that strategically buy players where they're weak and augment their team. And you will see they will have their fans in the lower league, and then they'll have even more fans when they get promoted. So it rewards these teams that do well, that rise up through the ranks, then get promoted, and maybe they're not the best team in the top league, but they might fight even more and eventually get up there and win either the Premiership or the top 14.
I mean, Exeter. I mean, pretty much what. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, I was actually trying to think what team was that in England that did so well. A Saviour of the Week is going to absolutely hate me for this. Sorry, Charlie. He's going to be editing this, and he's just going to be sitting there going, "Oh, dick." But that's it. I mean, is the ring fencing of the Pro 12 / Pro 14 going to be, is that what causes this lack of competitiveness, or is there just internal politics with each union and area, or is there a lack of resources? Or again, is this something that just goes in circles of the self-fulfilling prophecy? We have media and reporters saying that it's not a great league, and these are members of not a great league. They're not getting money, so they can't go out and buy good coaches, players, equipment, and grounds. And then because of this, they're not good, and so nobody goes to their matches, and they hear that it's not a good league, and the media reports it's not a good league, and then we just keep going around in circles. I mean, the points that we're kind of addressing the whole time really are, they all are related to one another in some way, shape, or form, but it's all got to do with the core of the league. Can this be solved in any way, or is this, an inherent problem, or can this be solved by expansion, or are we, just hoping and dreaming? So, I mean, I don't think we can just turn around and say, let's solve marketing, let's solve the lack of competitiveness. I don't think anybody, or at least I hope nobody out there is saying that expansion, whether it's conferences or a league, is going to solve Cardiff Blues' problems. I mean, maybe more money. We're all getting about €500,000. I don't know what that is in pounds a year. Maybe about £400,000. We're going to have our travel expenses covered. We're going to have two fantastic teams in the league. We're going to have hopefully more broadcasting money. We're going to have more sponsorship exposure. So maybe Guinness is going to want to throw more money at us. Or maybe we should do something like the Champions Cup and say, let's get 2 or 3 title sponsors on board and get more money through that. But of course, I mean, look, we're just kind of sitting here and discussing what's wrong with, inherently wrong with the league at the moment or historically. And I think really the next point that we have, well, actually that's the last of the main points that we had. Really, we're going to roll in now to kind of more minor points that we've come up with, that we're just generally unhappy with the league, or it's just something that is kind of result of the previous points as well. So I think this one is going to be a fantastic topic. The quality, or the quality of refereeing and refereeing standards. I mean, I'll let you take this one, because as an Irish fan, I might just end up talking about individual referees from a certain country,
from a
both in positive and negative light, because there's, obviously
from a certain game against a certain Connacht against a certain linesman.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's something that's been sort of widely talked about for years now, is Pro 12 refs, with the exception of some sort of stars that have come out of it, like Nigel Owens. But generally, it's sort of considered to be a bit of a amateurish kind of refereeing standard, where there's something seemingly something to complain about every week. There's some story that comes out of it. There's some.
Oh, there's some team or some set of fans is going to be slighted in some way. I mean, really, it's no different to Super Rugby, no? I think the current controversy in Super Rugby is they have had South African referees for the Lions match and now in the final, which the Lions are in.
The issue with Jacko Piper playing or refereeing, in this final. Actually, as sort of talking about it, it seems you mentioned Super Rugby. It's another international competition, another competition where there's lots of complaints about the ref. English and French people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't hear a lot of ref complaints coming out of the Premiership or Top 14, where there's obviously more equal kind of being sort of one country competitions. I don't hear so many complaints about the ref coming out of. Obviously, there are bound to be at sports, but there's not as many. Or at least not as many claims of bias.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's people reduce the referee to their nationality. I mean, in all honesty, a referee should be judged on their performance on the pitch, not on what it says in the inside of their passport or on the outside of their rugby jersey, because when it comes to passports, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales will have the same one.
Yeah, I mean, there are some. I will admit, that in terms of the refereeing standards, it's not just about nationality. There are some issues with things like some matches not having a TMO, that make it seem amateurish, that bring it back to that perception of it not being a real league.
I mean, I'd like to think they've fixed that lately, because at least, let's go on the last season, maybe last 2 seasons, I can't remember there not being a TMO. At least last season.
It's only in the not televised matches. So it happens a lot with when you're watching Scrum 5, for example. Obviously, all the matches are recorded, and then there'll be a try decision in the corner or something, and then they have to explain that there was no TMO because they're in Italy in the middle of December and they didn't send a TV crew, so there's no TMO, and it just seems a bit. Again, from someone who maybe isn't familiar with the league, that would seem something a problem for an amateur league not having a TMO, not something for the top domestic competition in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Italy. It's again, it's all about the perception that you're giving.
It's basics. If you can't get the basics right, how can you expect to be considered a top professional, prestigious league, looking to get more and more and more fans? I mean, that is always going to be an issue. I'm actually surprised that that's still going on. I didn't realize it was. Now, I know there's non-televised matches, which I said earlier should not be a thing. I mean, it's if for some reason Zebre versus Treviso wouldn't be televised in the UK or Ireland, I'd say, all right, yeah, fine. So long as it's televised in Italy, that's fine. I don't mind. But I seem to remember either Treviso or Zebre versus Leinster wasn't televised in the previous season. I remember going, what? I'm sitting at home. I'm not going out to a pub. I think it was a Friday night because I didn't want to drink. I know, I think the girlfriend was out, so I'm sitting at home alone. And I just wanted to watch a bit of rugby, and I saw Leinster was playing, and I just found out, oh no, I can't watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's yeah, it's frustrating. But to realise that there's not going to be a TMO because they haven't sent a TV crew, yeah, that's just I don't know what to say. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, it might have changed in the last year. You might be right in because I know with Eurosport coming into Italy. There's been definitely more televised games this year, but I remember I have been shocked by it recently. The fact that there hasn't been a TMO in game. It's happened at the Arms Park recently. Which it shouldn't happen. You're in a capital city. You should be able to, even if it's not televised, you should have an official there with a camera. Even if it's just, a ref standing in the corner with a handheld thing. It's just, anything. Just
here, let's grab a couple of fans, pay them their beer for the night, and just give them handheld cameras.
It seems ridiculous that the whole thing that maybe going to Italy, the travel thing, maybe not being able to have the right equipment is barely forgivable, but
no, it just doesn't. That doesn't make sense.
Not having that kind of thing in Cardiff or Newport is just like you said, it doesn't make any sense why they wouldn't have that. It's something that's
I wouldn't accept any excuse for that. That's pointless that you'd even try to excuse it. You're not in the middle of the Sahara Desert, or it's like saying, we're seeing people talk about future expansion, which is also actually a point that we're going to come across towards the end of the podcast. People talking about future expansion of the Pro 14 on the sub, and some people asking, should we add a Georgian team or Romanian team, and the odds. I hope to God, I mean, I'm interpreting as sarcastic. I hope it is sarcastic comment, saying how about the Russian Siberian teams, NSA or Krasnoyarsk, which take 20 hours to travel to. I would excuse then in a minus 22 degree temperature in the middle of winter if you don't have a TV crew with a TMO. I mean, then I'd say, yeah, fine. Yeah, okay, you're excused. But Italy, nah, that's the winter. It's not even going to be as bad as Connacht in January, where when you kick a ball through the sticks, the ball comes flying back at you. So I mean, like, talking about just refereeing in general, like inside Ireland, which province the referee is from. And again, coming from a Leinster perspective, you would hear a lot of fans call out 2 or 3 referees in particular from a certain southern part of the island, as saying that they're openly anti-Leinster. It's going to sound like this is the second time I've mentioned Munster. It's going to sound like I'm picking on them.
Really?
I do know a story. I do know. I like Munster. Listen, they're the yin to our yang. I mean, we're not Leinster without Munster. Let's put it that way. But I do know a personal anecdote from the Rugby World Cup 2015, and I remember seeing on Facebook someone asking for the lend of a Leinster jersey, quote unquote, for a friend in London, and some other people were responding, and a mutual friend of ours a former colleague. We all worked in the same company. He moved to London and he said, "Yeah, look, I'm in London. I've got a Leinster jersey. Who needs it? You have a private message." Fast forward about, I don't know, 6 months, and I met the poster of this status in the RDS, and he kind of pulled me aside and said, "Do you know why I've actually said that or posted that?" Well, the referee that we had there tonight was over at the Rugby World Cup, and in the Kangaroo Court was sentenced to wear a Leinster jersey for the day. And this individual, this referee, is from Munster, and he asked for the jersey on Facebook, and our mutual friend in London gave it over to him, and at the end of the day he didn't get the jersey back. Reason? Because that referee burnt it when he was finished wearing it. And now, look, credit to the guy. He gave about £250, which is about 3 times the value of a rugby jersey, to our mutual friend in London. But I mean, look, I'm looking at that as a kind of humorous side of it. Like, it is entertaining. Referees are human. He didn't know where the jersey came from in a Kangaroo Court, and he had a bit of fun himself. But every time I see this referee, I'm not going to name him because this will just get me in shit as well. Whenever I see him referee Leinster matches, I sit there, and whoever's sitting beside me, I tell this anecdote. It's just, I think, I know I made a joke at the start of this point about Welsh referees, but actually I don't think really Irish teams have that many problems, apart from Connacht, sorry, have that many problems with Welsh referees. I just feel that Leinster really just has a problem with Munster referees. But I know, look, I'm not shitting on Munster, or at least I don't mean to. As I said, they're the yin to our yang, so
it's similar in Wales. Nigel Owens was famously born slightly closer to Llanelli than he was to Swansea.
Yeah.
So therefore he's a filthy Turk and hates the Ospreys with all his heart. So it's a similar sort of thing we have over here.
Of course, and I think that's actually a bigger complaint than the referee's Welsh or the referee's Scottish. I think every country has shit referees, and I think in general we complain about all of them. And I think we were maybe wrong in the beginning to kind of talk about nationality over the actual individual referee's performance. I think that's, especially when you're having pints at a match, you end up saying, Welsh fucker, he cost us the match. But I think just the standard of refereeing in general is just the problem in the league. Like, it's not nationality, it's not even provincial or regional. I just think in general the standard is low.
Yeah, I would agree.
And just people and people just use Welsh / Munster, in my case, as an excuse.
Yeah.
And I mean, there have been kind of moves to try and improve refereeing, I believe, by saying that the home team, or the home union, the touch judges and the TMO will be from that union, and then the referee will be from a different union, or at least try to be, because I believe a Leinster referee did referee a Leinster match last season, and I don't believe the scoreline was flattering for whatever the opposition was. But I believe in that case there was just no way they could avoid it. But I mean, like, how would you solve these problems? Well, I would say South Africa has a decent level of refereeing, or at least another pool of referees from which we can draw. And as far as I understand, this expansion is going to open them up to the Pro 12, Pro 14 as well, which, maybe people will just start saying, South African referee. Who knows? But I think that's a good move nonetheless. I mean, whatever the people's reasons, whether they're going to blame the nationality, the locality, or the haircut of the referee, I still think increasing the pool of referees from a country as large, rugby-loving, and as prestigious as South Africa can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean they've definitely got a great refereeing pedigree. I mean, say what you will of Craig Joubert, he has been the best in the world at points in his career. And then you've got, they seem to be a constantly have a South Africa seems to have constantly have a great referee, a generation at least. So it would be good to have that sort of experience in the Pro 14.
Exactly, and I mean, you're talking about Joubert or Salt and Paper, but the thing is, there's going to be what? Let's just pick a number. 12 referees that you or I have never heard of, and that some South African Supercross prawn is probably listening right now, and he's probably listing them off, counting them through his fingers on each hand, saying these guys are good. Or shit, I don't know. Maybe he's saying they're shit. And these are going to be added into the league. And just that diversity alone, I think, is going to be beneficial. Whether they're both on touch judge duty, or they're comparing notes post match, or it's, say, start of the season, they're sitting down and saying, this is what we need to focus on. I think it's going to add to the league. At least the quality,
yeah.
I think it's going to make a difference.
I'd agree.
But I don't think we can spend another half an hour talking about refereeing standards. As we said, it's going to be a bit of a problem talking about this one. But I think we can cover these 2 points fairly quickly.
We covered a lot of in the previous discussion. To be honest, it's sort of.
So again, yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's there. I just listed these 2 points out because in case we didn't cover them enough, or if they didn't come up, I mean finances in general. So again, I think the reason why I put this one down here is just to state that this is hamstrung by the size of the market, and Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland have a population of only 15 million. And you compare that to England, which is what, 55? France, 60 something, I think it's 63. And then we expanded into Italy, which has a population of 60 million. Now that wasn't maybe the most successful expansion. And then South Africa, again, rugby is a minority sport there, or at least it's focused on certain regions, and even then, in those regions, it's still a minority sport. But South Africa, adding in 55 million people from a rugby crazy nation, with 2 well-performing teams covering what 30% of the country. I mean, that will have some financial clout, at least for viewership. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully that'll kind of turn the finances around, really. And the final point that we have that we identified then, just being, I think you raised this point, the responsibility to develop rugby over a quality product. So if you want to maybe talk about that, or
yeah, I mean, sort of the decision to bring the Italians in was had 2 main points, and one of them was having the Italians pay them a lot of money every year.
Yeah.
And the other one was, well, at least publicly, was improving Italian rugby. And my point was basically that should the Pro 12 or Pro 14 have this responsibility to, or this perceived responsibility to develop rugby over producing a quality product with the best teams they have available? I mean, it sort of links into something we might talk about a bit later in terms of involving North American, German, Romanian, Spanish teams in some way or another.
Yeah.
You have to consider, is that going to provide the best product available? Is that going to be the best league? Or is it just this kind of idea that you're picking up these smaller nations, putting them on your shoulders, and is it just going to drag you down? So yeah, we'll go into more of that later. But yeah, it's just a position I had mainly about the Italians.
Exactly. Like I know what your hope would be, and I mean that's I think we're going to discuss more so your vision later than just the prospect of expansion. Which, by the way, you've already posted on the sub, and I've already agreed with you as well. Like you know, we're going to discuss an idea. Like, it's not going. I don't think it's ever going to be realized in any way, shape, or form, unfortunately. But you know, is it rugby philanthropy, or is it actually disguised greed? Oh, we're going in and we're going to help the Italians. Yeah, look at us, we're great. By the way, pay us $2 million a year to be part of our league. You've got no professional development. You're going to be shit forever if you don't. And then they threatened to pull out in 2015. And the Celtic unions shit the bed, bend over backwards, and say, "Okay, no, you don't have to pay $2 million anymore. Please just fucking stay in the league." I mean, if we would have lost them, where would we be now? I mean, oh God, who knows? So, yeah, is this a problem? It is, because there are only 15 million people in these three nations. No matter what we do, unless we breed like rabbits, which isn't going to really happen, or at least even if we do, still won't get us as many people as you know, England or France. Then we have to expand, and I believe this is kind of where this is essentially what the point of the expansion is. You know, the IRFU president or CEO said, "Expand or die. You have to expand." And that's what people on the sub are saying as well. And it is inevitable. We do need to expand. We do need to get a larger market. But the question is, you know, should you expand to these countries under the guise of, yeah, we're helping them? Or should you just cold-heartedly, ruthlessly say, you know, screw the dead weights, let's go for the heavy hitters of South Africa and focus on them. So I think we'll expand this point anyway later.
Just sort of going back, like, you know, you look at the teams that have been rumoured to be part of the expansion, and it's mainly North American and German teams, which just so happen to be where all the money is in developing rugby at the moment. You know, people have been talking about adding Georgian and Romanian teams, but they just don't have the same amount of money, so they don't really care about it. They're probably in a better position to have a better club team. They'd probably be more competitive, but they don't have that sweet Capri Sun money that Germany have.
Exactly. Hans Peter Wild. And I seem to remember, do they want to call their first professional team a few years ago? Was it the Wild Tigers? I mean, I'll find it out hopefully before we actually end up talking about expansion. But it was probably one of the funniest names I could have seen or read for a professional rugby team, considering that this is the man's name being used in English for, I don't know, Wild Tigers. Oh yeah, God. But I think we can finally say, and it's taken us an hour and 42 minutes to discuss the inherent problems with the Pro 12. that alone should really show people. Well, yeah, I mean, there are actually topics that we could have like focused on by themselves and really fleshed out and really kind of delved into and done more research on, or just some idle speculation and talk about things that are just going to piss certain people off because we don't know what we're talking about. So I think, you know, we can finally now focus on the expansion itself. What has actually been announced, and what is actually going to happen, and then what we can do is maybe talk about some things that could have been, Would they have been viable? Would they not have been viable? Or maybe they should have done. Or again, I believe someone on the sub said this announcement and the structure of this new league is actually fantastic for what could have been, and people are just complaining. Could these complainers have come up with anything better? Realistically, no. And realistically, you and I are not going to come up with anything better. But we're not here to just, complain. We're here to look at it and try and see the positives and negatives of each. So I suppose with that, if you want to lead us in.
The expansion has led us to 2 conferences, both apparently of equal skill. I mean, they've done it seems fairly evenly. They're doing it completely based on league position of the previous year, so the conferences will change again next season. But for now, for this initial season, the Conference A is made up of Munster, Ospreys, Glasgow, Cardiff Blues, Connacht, Zebra, and Cheetahs. Each team in that conference will play each other home and away. And same for Conference B, which is Scarlets, Leinster, Ulster, Edinburgh, Treviso, Dragons, and the Kings. And then they'll play, each team from each conference will play one from the other once, home or away. Not sure how they're going to decide that yet.
It already has been decided. So just to let you know, Ulster has confirmed they have 11 games at home, and Leinster have confirmed that we only have 10 games at home. And I believe which Scottish team was it? Might have been Edinburgh. I think someone it might have been Glasgow confirmed 10. So again, I read that through. Someone got a mail from their home team in Scotland saying that they'll have 1 free ticket to one of the derby matches there. So,
well, yeah. I mean, expanding on the derby matches, they are going to be protected from this one-off conference system that they're doing.
Exactly, yeah.
For example, Ospreys and Scarlets are in separate conferences. Outside of that derby thing, they'd be playing each other once a season, either home or away. But in this, they'll be playing each other twice, home and away, despite being in different conferences. And that adds up then to 21 games per season, which is just 1 less than we were before.
Yeah.
But for teams that only have 1, I forgot to mention, it's conferences are split evenly as well between nations. So a country like Ireland or Wales that has 4 teams, you have 2 each in each conference. Scotland, Italy, South Africa, they have 2 teams, so 1 each in each conference. So because they have to still play the same amount of extra games that the Ireland and Welsh teams will have, they play their derbies 3 times rather than twice. So that all adds up then to 21 games a season for all teams. And I think you had quite a point on the fairness of this derby system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the easy way to remember it is 12 plus 7 plus 2 for the whole amount of matches. 12 in your conference, 7 out of your conference, and then 2 derbies. But, yeah, I mean... looking at the conference system itself, first off, before we go into the fairness of derbies or the situation, I mean, they really did at least think about it rationally, and they split it as fairly as they could.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. I'd agree with the prevailing thought that Conference A is tougher. Or more even We'll put it that way. Whereas I believe Conference B might be a bit just more spaced apart. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's roughly fair, or could they have done a better job? I mean, like, what could they have done besides, say, 1+4 in one group, and then 2+3 ranked teams in the other group?
I personally, I don't think they could have made it any fairer.
Yeah.
And just because of the fact that there may be a imbalance of better teams to perhaps not better teams, naturally meant there might be one slightly imbalanced conference compared to the other. You're never going to get a perfect system where it's all going to be, because despite rankings, the way they've done the rankings is mathematically sound, but obviously there's things to consider, like form and general sort of past performances and things like that you have to consider, which kind of lean towards these perceptions that one is stronger than the other.
And just to looking at it, I mean, it is kind of funny that they've put Scarlets as number 1. Because if you're going to go, purely based off of league standing, they were 3rd. No.
Yes, they were 3rd.
Yeah, they were 3rd. So instead of saying league standing, they were number 3. They were the best Welsh team.
Yeah.
And Leinster were the 2nd best Irish team. So it is kind of funny looking at it that way, because again, this protects the amount of teams per country in each conference. And unless you're going to have a situation where Munster are number 1 in the league, win the league, and the knockout rounds in the final, and Leinster, Ulster, and Connacht are ranked, 12, 11, and 10 in last season. Unless that was the situation, it isn't really imbalanced. It is fair, Scarlets were the best Welsh team, and they won the league. They're up there at the top of Conference B, and it's not stacked in too much of a way. So I don't really think they could have done it in a better way. I mean, they could have just taken pure, rankings and said out of the league, and said number 1 and number 4 out of the league in total, regardless of which country, and put it that way. And then it would have been a weird, imbalanced system. But so I mean, you did mention. Sorry, actually, just before I go on, there was a thought in my head. It's actually gone out now. I probably come back into my head now in a short bit, but so I suppose we might as well just move on to the derby matches. So they do count towards the league standing.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Now, I'm going to be open here, right? They have the 2 options. 1, they don't count towards the league, and 2, they do count towards the league standing with league points. If they would have chosen no, they don't count towards the league standing, then they would have been friendly matches. And could you imagine Leinster versus Munster fixture? Let's say hosting in Dublin was the additional derby match, i.e. the friendly. Could you imagine Lansdowne Road without the atmosphere of competition? And it's just, whatever. So I am happy that they count towards the league. But on the other hand, now again, I don't want people to think that I'm just sitting here saying, this is a horrible thing, throw it all out, get rid of it, and get rid of the South Africans. I just want to say, look, I'd rather be critical and skeptical of what we have in front of us and be pleasantly surprised towards the end of the season that I was wrong, than the other way around, get my expectations up and think everything is perfectly fine. No matter what option they choose, there was a problem with either. And the problem with making these derby matches count towards the league is, I'll use Connacht as an example. Um, Connacht's record in Belfast is abysmal. Their best record is probably in Dublin, which is not saying a lot because I believe in the last 17 years they've won, was it once, and drew one other match. And Munster is, in Limerick, in Thomond Park, is dire. So, whereas they can beat any of these three teams in Galway on their day, even when they went ahead and won the Pro 12, their record away to these three teams wasn't great. So, we want a league that is going to be fair for every team, and that is not this system.
Okay, I see what I see what you're saying. I just wanted to say something before you move on or something. I see what you're saying in terms of Connacht's record away. That seems like more of a problem for Connacht than it does a problem for the Pro 12 or Pro 14. The fact that they can't win away in these places seems to be more of a fault for the team than for the system. Because I know what you're saying in the having more away games against these teams than other teams in the conference will be. But I mean, all the other teams have to play against extra away games as well in their derbies.
True.
That they may not be particularly good at, and it seems like it's not. Teams will have to get better at winning away, rather than
You've got a good point.
I'm saying I don't think it's a problem with the system.
And Connacht does need to improve to that level. I mean, Connacht won a Pro 12, which is fantastic, but if you cannot continue the form, then it was an anomaly. And if you can't consistently win away, you're not going to win another Pro 12. I mean, it was Rugby World Cup, and they had everything go their way in that season. I don't want to take away from that victory. Both sides of my family are from Connacht, so that's not something I want to do, is shit on my heritage. But let's put it this way, right? Let's take a simple example of two-team derby. Zebre and Treviso. What if Treviso goes in and manages to win 3 out of 3? Right? It's not going to be the most difficult thing to do for a team to do that. Whereas Connacht, traditionally, history will tell us, has a poor record away for all those teams, will win potentially 0 out of 3. Now, their home matches, they might do it. That is just based off of potential unfair. Whereas in a straight round-robin league, right, they would play everybody and they would have an equal chance against everybody. I mean, it's not exactly, like, you can't compare the derby window equally in each country, if you know what I mean. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I don't want to say, oh boo-hoo, this one specific team isn't going to do well. It's just not equal. Whatever team you pick and compare it to another team, it's just not going to be equal. And if it's not equal, you could end up with a 15-point gap. And 15 points is no small margin. Right? And that's my concern. Now, again, as I said, I'd rather be overly critical and then find out towards the end of the season that, do you know what, I was proven wrong. I would like to be proven wrong. That I'm being too much of an ass towards it. Instead of the opposite, where I think everything's going to be rosy, and then we end up with, I don't know, Ulster somehow getting 15 points over Leinster because it's an unfair window. I mean, it's kind of like extending the international window, where that is also unfair. because teams with a larger squad like Leinster, Munster, Ospreys, or Scarlets will generally do better because they have, professional conveyor belts of academies. Or maybe one year they choose fewer Ospreys players and they have more of their big guns to go out and play. I mean, that is the nature of the league. It is a bit uneven at times. But that's just my concern, is that they're increasing that uneven field for this derby window.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it's going to be as imbalanced as you're maybe fearing it's going to be. I do see your point in that it's could end up being unfair, but I don't think it's. I think it'll sort itself out in the way that sport generally does, and that by the end of the season, the top 3 teams will be the best performing 3 teams in each conference. I think.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a Super Rugby situation where there are these gigantic gaps between conferences. I don't think we're going to end up with that. That's not going to happen. And I don't think we're going to end up in a situation where this league is as complicated or all over the place. I mean, that's why that didn't work as a product. But I've seen people say that they on the sub that they've read on Facebook that some people just find the conference system too complicated, and that's probably one of the few things I'd say it's not. And I too I've seen people on, say Leinster pages or Pro 12 pages kind of just saying, wait, what, are we playing the derbies? Are we not playing the derbies? It's not complicated. The derbies are saved, and I believe they've chosen the better option of the two. Because if these were only just friendlies, I think you'd hear me screaming into this microphone right now. So I think, in all honesty, out of the two options, I'd rather have this slight imbalance and, maybe slight uneven field, compared to just losing the importance of derbies altogether. But I mean, I suppose a question that is bound to come up is, we have 14 teams. We have the top 14. Do you think in any way round robin Pro 14 could have worked? Or do you think that's just not feasible?
The top 14 as a league is shit. I do not want to replicate that in any way. It's too long. It's too long a season. You look at it starts earlier than the Premiership and the Pro 12, and it finishes far later, well into the international window. And that causes problems just by itself, just having one league that does that. A second that has the majority of international players in Europe playing in it is going to cause havoc. If the Pro 12 got any longer as a season, it would be a disaster. The fact that it's getting shorter is a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Round robin would not have worked.
Yeah. So I seem to remember in 2009-10 when the Pro 12 expansion was happening with the Italian teams, people were up in arms at the amount of matches that would have been played for a 12-team league. I would argue that 12 is the sweet spot. It's the perfect length, perfect amount of matches for a competition that has so many union-controlled teams or influence teams in terms of Wales with that symbiotic relationship. That players are still protected, but they're also still getting enough game time that it's interest enough people to go out and see these players. A Pro 14, I would have liked to have at least seen one season of it. see if it would have been feasible or not. I think it would have been easier to implement than a conference system for the first season. If it doesn't work or if people don't like it, you switch to a conference system, and that gives people enough time to adapt. It also gives just the chance for every team to play every other team, including the South African teams, and see how they fare. But maybe then the seeding for conferences might have been a bit more realistic. We don't know. They chose the Super Rugby seeding for the two South African teams. But yeah, I mean, you said the top 14 is shit. I mean, apart from the length, I feel you're saying it's shit for all the other reasons. It's shit. Which is they go out and buy a ridiculous amount of players. They focus on size over skill, and all they do is demolish each other and willingly capitulate for away games. I mean, that to me is why I don't like the top 14.
I think the capitulating for away games is a part of the length of the season, in my opinion. You've got enough, you've got these home games that mean you can ride off them, and that obviously you can't put 100% into every game, otherwise it's gonna physically destroy your players. You know, and I feel like that's a part of the reason why the top 14 is the way it is the fact that it's just ridiculously long for a rugby season.
No doubt. I mean, I do believe was it Ionax won, or was it no? Yeah, I think it was Ionax beat. What heavy hitter was it? Was it Claremont away? No, I mean I'm not saying that you're wrong. I mean definitely that is one of the main reasons that you just capitulate for away games. But at the same time, I do feel as if there's also an element. Now, I was the one that used the word capitulate, but I believe there's an element of you just are not allowed to lose at home. So many Welsh, English, Irish players have said if you lose a home match, you can't walk down the street into the shops because you will just be accosted on the way. People will tell you how angry and upset they are. So, is it a symptom of the length? To an extent, yes. Tired bodies, big people, or big players. But at the same time, I kind of disagree as well. Maybe there is an influence, but it's just not as much as perceived. But I mean, in terms of a rugby product, I wouldn't say the length is what makes it shit. It's really just all the other components. And especially in terms of money, the amount of overall matches is what broadcasters and sponsors do care about. So when we talk earlier about finances, when we talk earlier about sponsorships and broadcasters, really their main interest is how much exposure are we going to get. And that's why competition like the top 14 can command such ridiculous sums of money. I don't know if the Pro 14 in a round robin could match it. But that would be one of the few things that maybe I could think of in its defense. But yeah, ultimately, I think conferencing would marginally win out for me for the better of the two.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the amount of money in French rugby as well. Can you imagine a team like Zebra going for the length of a top 14 season? Their players would be dead by the end of it. I don't think the Pro 12 has the same or resources or depth that French teams have. French teams have so many of these players that they just buy in case someone gets injured because they can.
Yeah.
And like I say, I think the length is a part. They top 14 can afford to have the length. and
Yeah.
we just can't over here.
I think Connacht would be another
Yeah.
good example here. I think the last 2 seasons, not the season they won, of course. They have had problems with injuries. I mean, especially in the second half of the season. And I believe last season they started to dip into, was it amateur players or was it semi-pro players that they had to dip into? Just simply because they had so many injuries and their squad is not as large as, say, Leinster, Munster, Ulster. And I mean, to give you a stat, Leinster played an insane amount of players this year. Our total squad size for the season out of players played was 57.
Okay, yeah.
I know. I know. I mean, when I read this stat myself, I couldn't believe that. And you know, I mean, on one hand, you kind of feel a little proud and you go, yeah, hey, fantastic, we got so many great players and our academy is performing well. And then you kind of pause and realize, I'd say about half of those academy players that we played above, you know, whatever. Let's say our squad is 30, 35 man. The rest being academy players, that's 22. Half of them will probably have to leave to other clubs.
Yeah.
Because there's just going to be no room, especially when you consider we have 9 or 10 back row players. In where are they going to play? So, two sides of it. From, you know, a Leinster perspective, we have such a huge squad, fantastic, more games, more rotation, we hold on to more players. But then you realise, as you said, Zebre, Dragons, even Cardiff, Connacht, how the hell would they survive? Now, part of me would argue 500,000 per year, plus an increase in broadcasting and sponsorship money over the next few years, because there's going to be a broadcasting contract renewal in 2018-19. Potentially there's going to be a lot more money down the line. If they spend that 500,000 wisely, that could be 2 or 3 players.
2/3 of a halfpenny.
Oh, Jesus Christ, let's not even go there. Well, I assume that he's taken a large pay cut to go back to Scarlets, but, you know, I suppose that's a topic for another podcast that might not last 2 hours and 11 minutes. But think, like, you know, again, I'm coming up with what if scenarios. I'm not saying that it's a, you know, literal truth that more money, Connacht can get these players, Connacht can develop over time. It's a big ask. And the question is, if they do get more money, this 500,000 per year now, plus down the road, potentially more sponsorship and broadcasting money from the Pro 12, plus their own sponsors for an elongated season, could they manage to increase the size of their player pool?
Yeah.
Or am I talking a lot of horse shit, and is this something that is, regardless of the amount of money, too difficult? Now again, I'm saying this in terms of Connacht because I know they will have a foreign player limit, whereas I believe Zebre and Treviso don't have that, which is why I didn't use them as examples. But I would assume that Zebre and Treviso might be a bit more difficult. But let me throw this out there. Zebre and Treviso squads in 2010, moving up from the Excelencia, I highly doubt they were going to be close to what they have today in terms of player development. And with their presence in the league over time, I know it's been slow, and I know they're not world beaters now, but I do believe that they have developed more Italian players than they would have otherwise, and that they could continue to develop more players as time progresses, and if their income would increase. That's my argument for, again, playing devil's advocate, because I don't believe it's you know, exactly feasible, but somebody has to make the argument.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. But I think you may as well, rather than sort of invest that money for the sake of a round robin season, have
Yeah,
more money to spend on better things in a conference system. Is my yeah.
yeah, true,
Uh,
true. I mean, as I said, for me, the conference system just kind of barely wins out. I'd say in my head I'm 55-45 for a conference system. I'm not overly gone on it, but let's see how it plays out. As the guy in the sub said, I forget who it was. I mean, can these moaners and complainers, or me, sitting here talking to you, come up with a better system? I know. I'm not paid enough to do that. So, yeah. So, talking about squad sizes and a top or Pro 14 season, we didn't talk about the amount of games, including European games, because a Pro 14 season is long enough without talking about Europe. And talking about Europe, we've now got South Africans in the Pro 14. What are your thoughts about them in Europe?
I think they made the right decision not to shoehorn them into the European system. They've spent years taking apart what was a great competition and rebuilding it haphazardly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm so scared of them knocking it down again and rebuilding it from nothing. I want them to get this version that they've built right first before they start making any changes to it, or more changes. They've finally managed to sort out Pro 12 meritocracy qualification, in that the best teams qualify now regardless of nationality, except if you're South African. But yeah, I think if they put the South African teams in, that has a knock-on effect to the Challenge Cup, which has a knock-on effect to the Continental Shield, in terms of their qualification allocation of teams. So I think if they were going to include the South African teams in European competition, they'd maybe have to expand the competition first, which is something that they've been thinking about. But yeah, I wouldn't. I think it's the right decision not to shoehorn them in at the moment, and the right decision as well for them. Well, it's every team has to play against South African teams, so it's right that they're not also making scores against them not count. I think it's just general league position. Take away South African from the equation in the final rankings. That's the best thing they could have done for the first season, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, but my question is, do you think they legally could have joined the European Cup this season? I mean, in other words, could the Pro 12/14 have turned around and said, "Hey guys, England and France, as of this season, if the South Africans get into the top 7, you'll be playing against them the next year." Could it have been possible to say that, or is that something that you think just needs a renegotiation or a separate negotiation, an agreement between the South African teams and the organisers of the European Cup?
There's going to have to be a conversation to be had there. They can't just shove them in out of the blue. But I don't think that the English and French would be that against it. I mean, if you look at it in terms of perspective, you could say that a couple of seasons ago they'd had either Zebra or Treviso playing in the Champions Cup, and now they could have Cheetahs or Kings. You're just increasing that level of competition, making it a better competition in terms of the quality of teams involved in it. I don't think they'd have too many complaints about it.
And again, it's it's increasing the size and reach and importance of the
Yeah.
competition. Meaning, again, this is a competition that wants to have 5 title sponsors. I believe they're up to 2 after, 3 seasons? Or going into their third. And that means more money for the sponsors, meaning they will be able to command more money or get those 5 sponsors by having more of a reach and more importance. And as well then broadcasting rights. I think it was the IRFU, WRU, and SRU that turned around and said, we'll admit you into the Pro 12, but until we have a proper renegotiation and sit down and talk about Europe and involve the English and the French, that we're not going to allow you to take our spots. Because again, we only have 7 spots, which is more generous than the French and English, but still wouldn't be generous enough to, I suppose, allow for the South Africans to take 1, potentially 2 spots away. It would just cause too many problems and annoy too many. Personally, I believe it would have been better, or maybe that's bad phrasing on my part. A perfect solution would be a league where, including the South Africans, it will be a meritocracy. We would see South Africans in the league, in the Champions Cup, and every single match will be a fight for tooth and nail. I mean, you would want to beat those South Africans and beat them with a bonus point. Speaking of that, would a worry of yours be that maybe some teams would reserve players against the South Africans because they're not going to contribute? Or do you see the quality of these matches and matchups being affected?
No, to be honest, I don't see that, because it's because it's based entirely on league position by the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Every team is going to want as many points as possible to get into that position, and they're still going to get those points by beating South African teams.
Yeah.
South Africans are going to want to impress in the league.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to be looking to drop any games. Like the fact that they don't have European qualification means that they're not going to really have any games to drop. Their focus is still on getting that top 3, whether it's for their own reason, being in the quarterfinals, not necessarily for qualification. Well, yeah, the top 3. All I'm trying to say is the top 3 is a target for every team, whether it's European qualification or whether it's quarterfinal qualification in the league. And I don't think that that's going to make for easy games against South African teams.
Well, no, again, as you said, like what they have to play for, take Europe out of the equation. They've only got one focus now. I'd look at it as if they reach semi-final, it could be a home semi-final, and a final, again, depending where it is. There's going to be money for players and for the team and the union at the end of it if they win, and money talks. And we talk about success and trophies. Ultimately, it's all about the money that is going to help these teams then progress even further in the future as well. Winning breeds more winners, I suppose, is a way of looking at it, or allows teams then to get more money to build the structures to create more future winners. Yeah, of course, they're not going to turn around. I'm not saying the South Africans will say, whatever, we've got nothing to play for. My concern is just, they will flatten. And we like what we spoke about earlier. One of the inherent problems is we know which teams are going to be at the bottom half of a season within an error of margin, of course. If we take several seasons on average, we can guess which 6 will be in which half. And my concern is that half will be easily beatable by South Africa. And those teams that are somewhere hovering around the middle could potentially suffer because of it. So, for example, Ulster in the situation they're in the upcoming season. We don't want to get into the reasons because it is an unfortunate situation, and they've now lost two key players as well. I would place them normally around third, fourth, fifth, maybe sixth in a bad season. Going into this, they might lose against both South African teams, but they might beat the lower half of the table. And what if they're pushed down to 6th/7th? Because this might actually be a very bad season for them, and that might affect the mid-table teams. Is kind of what I'm saying here, especially seeing as there's no playoff between 4 versus 4. Which is actually another topic.
I'd agree with you
on
that. I think there should be that playoff between 4 versus 4 because of the differences in conferences. It seems odd to compare the points differences between the two for something like that.
Is it not table points? No.
Oh yeah, it is. It is.
So like,
but with the conference, with the fact that they're playing different teams a different amount of times, having those comparing table points to have automatic qualification rather than putting those fourth places into a playoff seems less fair.
Yeah, no, exactly. I suppose a better way of looking at it is bonus points more so than anything. A lot of what happens in the Pro 12 is picking up a losing bonus point or a try bonus point, or a losing plus try bonus point. Can be the difference. For example, Leinster and Munster at the top of the table, we lost out. We had a ridiculous season, breaking record after record after record, but ultimately Munster had an insane season from the perspective that everybody wrote them off, both in the Pro 12 and the European Cup, and managed to pip us by 1 point to make the top of the league and first seed. So, again, maybe the addition of these South African teams could affect, even just by minute margins, points differences, try bonus points. And again, I'm only saying this because it is a very uneven league. I believe someone posted on the sub that the top 14 out of any sport is the most equal league on the planet, which was amazing to see. And then they kind of did analysis of the same, except in rugby, the different leagues. And apparently Pro 12 was absolute last or second to last, which is not surprising to you or me. And so just my concern is, you throw these two sharks, no pun intended, because the sharks aren't in it, into the Pro 14. And I'm just, again, I'd rather come up with these situations that worst possible scenario could happen, and then at the end of the season find out my fears were unfounded. I just feel as if, again, this could affect qualification for Europe for the mid-table teams, whether that's by a try bonus point or a losing bonus point, or by absolutely breaking their players, because these South Africans are man beasts.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. I'm personally sort of a little bit more optimistic about the season. Although I suppose I feel like I have to be. Being sort of, I don't know, it feels like I've been the sort of person to perhaps unfairly complain about the Pro 12 in the past. And I feel like this is sort of one of those things where an opportunity is sort of been dropped in your lap to say, okay, this could work. So as a rugby fan, I feel like I kind of have to support this new way of doing things in its expansion and in the conference system. Just because it feels like, after years of sort of complaining, maybe, oh, nothing's changing, they're not listening to the fans, they have sort of started to go, okay, well, we are going to be proactive. We are going to try and make more money. We are going to bring in good teams, and things like that. And I feel like I have to say, okay, fair enough, go for it. See how it goes. And I have to sort of applaud them for having the guts to do it in the middle of the pre-season, between two seasons, when it wasn't really it's gone from being sort of a idea in the pipeline to being an actuality in the space of months. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, that's kind of the format that we took over this podcast, and I suppose the reason why it ended up so long is we agreed before the podcast, like, where are the areas that we see core issues with the Pro 12, Celtic League / Pro 14, and we discussed them earlier. And as we realized while we were discussing them, some of them are fixable, some of them are just simply not, and some of them are just, yeah, I guess, taking Cardiff Blues as an example, you can't just wave a magic wand. When it comes to player development in Zebre and Treviso, going back to Brexit analogies, maybe I could go over to Theresa May and ask for her magic money tree. We'll bring it over to the Italians and say, here you go, go develop your squads and build world-class facilities. We know that Conor O'Shea is taking on the Italian rugby, and he focused on the team as well as the Pro 12 teams and the Excellencia as areas needing improvement. And for all we know, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we might see a domestic professional league in Italy, and we won't even have the 2 Italian teams. But no, I agree with you. Expansion had to happen at some point. And again, it could have been North American teams that we're discussing now. I'm quite happy that it's actually 2 very good South African teams with pedigree, with prestige, and with class, and with a fantastic style of rugby that I hope is actually going to get some people's interest, because what a lot of people out there that are not from Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and Italy don't realise is the season just gone by was an absolute try-fest. I mentioned earlier that we broke records. I believe we scored 90 tries in one season, and the previous record was 69, and that sounds like we're the only team to break that record in one season. I believe 4 teams broke the previous record, and 2 more teams came close to the record. It was try after try after try after try, and to see these 2 running rugby offloading teams put into this competition, it could be some amazing rugby that we can see. So yeah, I mean, definitely I hope to see it be a success. And I'm trying to wonder, what point were we actually on last? I think it was European qualification. Yeah. Was it? Or yeah, sorry, we're talking about mid-table and my concerns for might that affect them. But no, like, I'd agree with you that first and foremost, you can't have them qualify in the first season, and that at some point, maybe if the kinks are ironed out, and the risks for our countries and our teams are adequately taken into consideration, then yeah, or if the league is expanded, then yeah, then I'd love to see them qualify, and that would be a fantastic competition for Europe and Africa as well, and it would be more similar to Super Rugby, really, in that sense. Then
yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think really we're going into the final points then. Thank Christ, I hear the listeners say right now, or hopefully you're doing something repetitive at work, that you're actually listening to us monotonously talk about Celtic and European rugby. I think this final point really is going to be something that you really want to talk about, and that is future expansion. And I think we're going to break it down into two, and this is, first off, the fact that the organisers of the Pro 12 14, whatever you want to call it in the moment, has openly stated that they want to add North American teams. That this is phase one of international expansion for a, quote, global competition. And looking at Wikipedia, it even says that in August of last year they had begun talks with the unions of Canada and the USA, that the CEO of the IRFU, Philip Brown, said that they are considering establishing a US franchise, and that touted areas have been Washington and Houston, as well as Toronto, and then I believe two Western teams as well. So there are different areas kind of thrown out there. So ultimately, Charred Cheese, it looks like future expansion is inevitable.
Yeah.
We've heard all the rumours so far, and the rumours came true. And I wouldn't call these rumours when they come out and officially state it. So, a North American expansion. We're going to have time zone differences, travel differences, difference in quality of rugby, and fans. What's your take on expansion to North America, and should it be done?
I think any sort of expansion to North America would be best done if and when the Pro 12 has a second tier with promotion and relegation. Going into rugby league for a second, weirdly enough.
Oh God! I
look...
hear someone calling my name. Goodbye.
If you look at the Super League, what they've got there, and a couple of tiers down, you have the Toronto Wolfpack. They've entered in the it was a new team. They've entered in at a lower level of competition. They have time to acclimatise to the level of competition they need to be playing at, to build up a fan base. And that's been a lot better for them. They're kind of beating every other team, but it's been a lot better for them than if they were chucked in at the deep end. And they were losing every week, and they're not building up a fan base or building up any kind of history to their team. So I think if the Pro 12 had a second tier that was maybe made up of developing rugby nations, Spain, Germany, Georgia, Romania, USA, Canada, perhaps as well, that they could sort of build up a bit of a fan base, acclimatise to European rugby, which is objectively a higher standard than what they have in North America at the moment. And then if they can end up playing a Pro 12, Pro 14, whatever it is at the time level, then they will have earned it by earning promotion. And so I think that if they are going to break into the American market, they shouldn't just grab them and try and force them into a league that they're not going to quite fit in, and potentially ruin the whole chance of moving into the North American market for a long time. Because if they cock up the first time chance of doing it, they're not going to want to do it again. With any other potential teams or franchises. So I think the most important part of any kind of future expansion to me is adding a second tier with promotion and relegation between the two, because that opens so many more opportunities for developing rugby countries to have a chance, rather than chucking them in the deep end and ruining for them, and also lowering the competition for the teams that are in the top tier.
I mean, that absolutely makes sense. It's similar to now. Again, I'm not going to say that the Italians are horrible or there's problems. Again, we addressed this point earlier. Maybe they're performing exactly as they should be in a decent league. for their quality. And in fairness, I also brought up the point that they developed players, but it's taken 7 years for that to happen. And really, they still haven't performed amazingly in either the Pro 12 or the European Cup. It's going to take time. But I agree with you that, yeah, it might be a shock to the system. But I mean, what do you think about their motivations for doing this? And when I say they, I mean the organisers of the Pro 12/14 and the unions in Ireland, Wales and Scotland. I mean, what do you think the reason for doing this is, and why do you think they're hell-bent on getting these franchises into the system?
Well, I mean, it's a case of them being able to have their cake and eat it. They can get money from them, especially North America and Germany. And in the case of potential relegation and promotion, they can have their idea of promoting the game and developing the game in other countries.
Oh no, I mean, sorry. Take away any idea of promotion or relegation. Just talking about the fact that they've literally just said, that they want to expand. I mean, why? What's the reason? What's the point? I mean, why?
I think it's money and prestige and legitimization as a league. They want to be known worldwide in the rugby world as a big league. I mean, they're included in the top 3 in Europe at the moment. The Pro 12, it's the big 3, top 14 of Premiership and Pro 12, but it's mainly just Aviva, Premiership, top 14, and then the Pro 12 sort of straggling along behind. At least that's how it's perceived. And I think they want to shake that. They want to be as successful as the Premiership or top 14, but also be different enough to be marketable to other countries and other viewers.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just feel it's a bit short-sighted. Just give my opinion on it. It just seems to me to be the expand or die mentality that I just have the feeling as if the organisers of the Pro 12/14 have no faith in the core product. Again, understandable with the issues that we raised at the start of the podcast, which, when I say start, I mean an hour and 40 minutes. Which, it's understandable, but they're not solving those problems. Some of them solvable, some of them not. Some of them require more effort, more money. So certain expansion is necessary, and I believe the South African expansion is the right way to go. I believe there's no perfect solution to a 14-team conference system, and that an expansion would be necessary, further expansion would be necessary to balance it out. But I believe an expansion to North America would be short-sighted, would damage this potential good product that we have here in front of us as the Pro 14, right? I believe adding in 2 teams, which could potentially be in 2 different time zones within North America, as I believe it's a horrible idea. You're going to add ridiculous journeys, time differences. You're going to have ridiculous differences in talent of the players. You're going to have different sizes and fan groups. I mean, I don't know what the fans are like over there. I don't believe there's going to be that many. And even if you introduce a pro league or a pro team over there, I don't believe you're going to have a large following, as if it were a domestic American league. I believe expanding further. Going back to your idea of, so that's my 2 cents on North America. I believe it's a horrible idea. I believe it shouldn't be done, and I believe it will destroy this potentially good product that we have here as the Pro 14. To just finally address, I suppose, your ideal of promotion, relegation, in say a European Cup or European League of sorts. If down the road in a few years the South African expansion was successful, hopefully we get more South African teams on board. Ideal situation, we have 6 South African teams, and then on top of that, we can then look at our European neighbours and help them develop. Whether that's a German team with Hans-Peter Wild and his 27 million, I believe is the number, 27 million euro that he has for rugby there. or Georgia with their success, or Romania with their success in clubs as well. There are ways to get more teams around Europe, pair with certain soccer clubs, I believe is what one idea was, and get it up to, say, a 20-team competition or 24-team competition, divided into two different leagues, two different levels, one top tier, one next tier, with promotion and relegation. And you could see a very competitive style of rugby across Europe, where you would actually develop teams, actually have organic fans that aren't just parachuted in random cities in North America, with a huge amount of sponsorship, backing, and support. I mean, I would completely agree with, you kind of spoke about this idea, and, just as a short side story, which is going to take 30 seconds to explain, for people out there that didn't realize, back in 2005, there was an idea of a rainbow league for 11 Celtic teams. Rest in peace, Border Reivers. 3 or 4 Italian teams and 9 South African teams. So this isn't the first time that a Celtic, Italian, South African league has been thrown about the place. And if you'd have 24 teams, like in the original idea, then you could definitely do a 2-tier system. And if you include European teams, develop rugby while having a 2-tier system. But I guess 2 hours and 45 minutes in, we better wrap it up. Unfortunately, we didn't do this in an earlier time of the day. Otherwise, we probably would have fleshed out some of the ideas here towards the end of the podcast. We didn't realize it would take this long, and it took us close to an hour for coming up with the discussion points and ideas and eating pies. So I think we'll wrap it up after 11 o'clock, close to 1 o'clock. Apologize to your girlfriend from me, please. And mine isn't in the country, so I'm not going to have any problems. And so if anybody has any points, if you think that anything that we've said has merit, if you think you can add on to any points, if you think what we've said is total BS, or if you have better ideas for how to do anything, or if you believe in a North American expansion is a good idea, let us know. Write it into the comments, and we'll try and get back to you. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ugh.